Okay, so good morning, everyone. Jodie Siemens here from Taking Perspective. Thank you for joining me live. For those of you who are here and watching, Facebook sometimes is hard to pull up the comments. It's not always as quick as it is sometimes, so I do apologise if I don't get to your comments till after the webinar's finished. For all those who registered, you will receive this in your email box also. So today, Friday, the 27th of May at 9 a.m, we are doing a webinar on imposter syndrome and what is it? Okay, so here we are. So what's up for discussion today? So today we're going to talk about what imposter syndrome is. Is imposter syndrome a mental illness? Signs and symptoms of imposter syndrome, what causes imposter syndrome, and how do you break the imposter syndrome cycle? So first up, we have what is imposter syndrome? So imposter syndrome is something that's loosely defined as doubting your own abilities. So you're feeling like you're a bit of a fraud or a phony. This is something that's usually affects high achieving people. So those who find it quite difficult to accept their own accomplishments. So there's many questions of whether, they question themselves on whether they deserve the accolades, so to speak. So these kinds of feelings are quite common. They do affect 70% of us at some point in our lives, research has proven. So when these feelings of doubt are persistent and they can be persuasive, this is a condition, signs of the condition imposter syndrome. So studies have shown over the years that those who are different from their peers, so just going back to, for example, high achievers or first generation college or university students, they're usually ones who feel like they are suffering from imposter syndrome. Is imposter syndrome a mental illness? It is not actually a mental health condition. It is sometimes described how it's a term that describes how someone may feel if they don't feel as though they are as capable of others, and they have fears that they might be exposed as a fraud. So although imposter syndrome isn't actually an official diagnosis, many therapists realise that it's also a serious form of self-doubt. People with imposter syndrome tend to suffer highly from things like procrastination, anxiety, and that often leads to depression. So the next one we have here is some signs and symptoms around imposter syndrome. So I've got three here. An inability to realistically assess your competence and skills, attributing to your success or external factors, berating your own performance. We've also got here things like overacting, self-doubt, setting very challenging goals and feeling disappointed when you fall short, sabotaging your own success. And I've got another one, fear that you won't live up to the expectations. So while for some people, imposter syndrome can fuel feelings of, the motivation to achieve, it usually comes at a cost of a constant feeling of anxiety. And as I said before, that leads to depression in most cases of severe imposter syndrome. So you might, for example, over-prepare or work much harder than necessary just to make sure that nobody finds out that you're a fraud. So these are just the type of activities you might partake in because you feel as though you are a phony. This usually sets up a vicious cycle in which you think that the only reason you have survived and stayed where you are is because you've been, say, up all night rehearsing, say, a presentation or something like that. Or you think that the only reason that you got there was because, you know, you memorize the details about all the guests, say, you know, whether it's, I know this seems confusing, but if, say, you were going to a party, a family gathering, just as an example, and you memorized all the details about the guests so that you have something to talk about in amongst the small talk. So the problem with imposter syndrome is that you experience doing well at something. It never actually changes your beliefs that you hold about yourself. Doesn't matter how well you do. So you can memorize all the details about the guests. You can stay up all night and give a smashing performance at, say, a presentation for work. And regardless of the amount of pats on the back you get and how good you do, you never actually feel as though you're good enough. You still feel as though you're a phony in the situation. So even though you might sail through your performance, it still nags in your head, what gives me the right to be here? So the more you accomplish, the more you just feel like a fraud. It is though you cannot internalize your experiences of success. Just notice the American spelling on the presentation there. Okay, so the next one, what causes imposter syndrome? Many people who have imposter syndrome find that they grew up in families with stress for achievement and success. So families that expect you to be a high achiever. So if your parents went back and forth between, say, overpraising and criticism, you may have likely experienced feelings of being a fraud later in life. So they often find that imposter syndrome is something that's rooted into the values, the family values above all else, which I find quite interesting. Society's pressures can also achieve and can attribute to imposter syndrome. It's easy to measure your self-worth by what you've accomplished, and that's the society side of it. So certainly personality traits also are linked to high risks of experiencing imposter syndrome. Some of these characteristics you might resonate with. We've got here low efficiency, low efficacy, sorry, self-efficacy, can't even say that, refers to your belief in your own ability to succeed in any given situation. We've got here perfectionism. Perfectionism is a massive one. It plays a significant role in imposter syndrome because you think that you have to have, you know, the perfect script for presentations, conversations, whatever it might be, and that you can't say or ever do anything wrong. So you probably have trouble asking for help. You also find that you will procrastinate due to your high standards. So if any of you are interested in perfectionism and procrastination, issues that you are having problems with, you can contact me. I can send you to the link to a couple of webinars I've done on both topics. You can also go to my YouTube page and suss out those 2 webinars on perfectionism and procrastination. The bottom one there is linked to high levels of anxiety, insecurity, tension, and guilt. So how do we break the imposter syndrome cycle? To break the imposter syndrome cycle, you really need to accept that your achievements are what they are and you are worthy of them, and you just really need to recognize who you are and be comfortable in confronting some of those deeply ingrained beliefs that you're holding about yourself. It's the limiting beliefs that you have there that I suppose enforcing this feeling of imposter syndrome in your life. So I'll just read out the 6 tips that I've got here, and then I'll go into them a little bit deeper. So create reminders for yourself, separate your feelings from reality, quit the comparisons, that's a big one, understand the syndrome itself, talk to someone, and accept that nobody is perfect. So on the next slide, we're just going to go into create some reminders as a tip. So write down a list of your accomplishments that you are actually proud of. Save emails and notes where you're given praise. Keep these things handy and review them regularly when you're feeling like you're being a fraud or phony. Separate your feelings from reality is the next one. So if you're prone to these feelings of imposter syndrome, mentally prepare for them. Be ready to observe them, be ready to respond to them, and realize that they are just emotions, and remind yourself that you are always capable of success. The next one we've got here is quit comparisons. So people often go about comparing themselves to other people and other people's achievements. So in society, you may see that, you know, a highlight of a reel of someone's life. It's really not it's not good to compare yourself to someone else. Instead, you really need to just focus on yourself and being a better version of who you are, and really stop comparing yourself to others, because 9 times out of 10, the grass is certainly not greener on the other side. And I think that's pretty important. Understand the syndrome is the next one. So keep in mind that actual frauds don't have imposter syndrome. I'll read that again. Actual frauds and phonies do not have imposter syndrome. So you need to keep that in mind when understanding what the syndrome actually is. The very fact that you have imposter syndrome shows in itself that you are not an imposter. The next one I have here is talk to someone. So seek out your family, seek out your friends, and normalize these feelings and remind yourself that these fears aren't real. They are just limited decisions and emotions that you have placed upon yourself. They are not real. The other thing is you could see a therapist, depending on how ingrained and deep these feelings are, and whether or not just seeking family and friends' help is going to be enough. There is ways to overcome imposter syndrome. It's certainly, I wouldn't say it's easy to do, because again, it's really about all the ingrained, limited and negative emotions that you're holding about yourself. But you are able to work through them. As I've said many times, the brain is forever changing. It's just about changing the pattern that we create. The last one I've got here is accept that nobody is perfect. So we need to stop having unrealistic expectations of ourselves and understand that with working hard, you can lead to great results, and they don't have to be perfect, because there's no such thing as perfectionism. And in summary, I've got here, so you know, in regards to imposter syndrome and diagnosing yourself with imposter syndrome, here's just something that I've put together. Have you ever felt that you're not good enough to do the job you've been hired to do? That your bosses might figure you out at any moment? Or maybe you felt like you've only been pretending to be an adult who is capable, say, for example, of buying a house or raising a child, even though you know a lot of other people have totally figured that out. So for you, This is a symptom of imposter syndrome. A lot of people have felt this way. A lot of people are going to feel this way in the future. You are not alone. So no matter how much evidence that you are given that you are successful and you have the ability to navigate through your own lives and through your own jobs, you actually still feel as though you're not as smart as others. And this is imposter syndrome. So there are many factors that play a large role in imposter syndrome and the causation of them. And these are things like family upbringing, personality traits, social anxiety, even new roles. If you were to get a new job, or a new role of even having a baby and raising a child. So there's a lot of strategies you can take upon with the feelings of imposter syndrome. We talked about what you're experiencing, questioning your negative thoughts, and avoid comparing yourself to others. We spoke about talking to people. We spoke about creating reminders about all the good things that you've done and everything that you've accomplished, and learning to separate your feelings from reality. So what I mean by that is these limiting beliefs and negative emotions that we hold about ourselves are not our reality. So it's about understanding that these feelings are, say, on one side of the scales and realities on the other side of the scales. And you have to make sure that you are able to separate the two and that the balance comes in with reality. If this is something that is triggering for you and something that you would like to look further into, please flick me a message, seek me out. If you're on my socials, just send me a message and we can hook up for a free chat just to see where you're at and if this is an issue for you. So it's the end of the webinar. So tonight is the last chance to register for the 1-hour workshop on how to reshape your life. It starts at 7 p.m. and goes to 8 p.m. So it's just a quick little workshop. It's about going into depth about some of the limiting beliefs that we do hold. So this is really about developing some strategies to help you be the best version of yourself. We're going to work on your limiting beliefs and negative emotions, and we're going to work on one in particular for this evening and send you away with enough knowledge to work through some others. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining me today with this webinar, Imposter Syndrome, What is it? For those registered, you will receive a copy via your email, so look out for that. You can also find me on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. I also have a podcast on Anchor, Empowering Ordinary Women. Please check that out. And next Friday, the 3rd of June, my Lord, we're nearly in the middle of the year, I have a webinar on distractions and what is distracting you. So in that, we'll talk a fair bit about all our distractions, all that white noise that's happening, and ways that we can look into helping with some time management and focus so that we can avoid those distractions. So again, thank you all for joining me, and I will see you next week. Jodie Siemens from Taking Perspective.